I'm Rowan Ellis, 18 high school senior and former debate team co-captain. The gymnasium had been transformed into something unrecognizably polished white and gold balloons tethered to folding chairs, a rented stage flanked by velvet drapes, and the distinct buzz of speakers echoing slightly under the high ceiling. My name was supposed to be somewhere between Emerson Gaines and Samantha Harlow, neatly printed on the program and announced with the rest of the graduating class. But it wasn't. I stood near the edge of the bleachers, holding a slightly crumpled program in one hand, trying to act like I wasn't reading it for the 12th time. My fingers kept pressing into the crease where my name should have been. Instead, there was a strange space, like a sentence cut mid-word. My stomach twisted as the list kept going, like I didn't exist. Rows of proud parents craned their necks toward the stage, some standing on tiptoes for a better view. Teachers, in mismatched black gowns and colored stoles, lined the side of the gym. A faculty usher with a clipboard and headset brushed past me. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "Hi, I'm not on the program." She glanced at me, barely pausing. "Name Rowan Ellis. R-O-W-A. She cut me off with a shake of her head and a flick of the program pages. "If it's not printed, I can't do anything. You'll need to talk to Miss Bernard. She's backstage." "Okay, but look, I'm sorry. I have to cue the next row," she said, stepping away toward a cluster of students adjusting their caps. I stood frozen, the hum of celebration growing louder around me. Someone nearby laughed loudly. A girl in a blue honor cord posed for photos with her mother and a bouquet wrapped in metallic paper. I was still holding my tassel in my hand. I hadn't even clipped it to the mortarboard yet. There was no seat reserved for me. No folder with my diploma. No mention of me, not even a mispronounced version of my name. If you've ever had a moment like this when your whole world was supposed to notice you and instead looked right through you, drop a comment or let me know where you're watching from. Hit like or subscribe if you've ever stood in a room full of applause and felt like it was meant for someone else. They were nearly through the alphabet. Parker, Willow, applause. A few names later, the principal approached the podium again, voice slightly too loud in the mic. "Before we conclude, we'd like to invite this year's valedictorian to deliver her farewell speech. Please welcome Harper Lynn." Polite clapping, a few whistles. Then Harper walked up to the podium in her perfectly pressed gown, golden cords swaying at her sides. Her heels clicked crisply against the gym floor. Harper and I weren't close, not really. We shared 2 classes and had debated each other once she beat me. Barely, and winked when she did. But I didn't expect her to look straight at me when she took the mic. "This isn't the speech I submitted," Harper said, voice steady but oddly personal. "But I hope no one minds if I go off script." A few confused murmurs, and someone laughed. The principal gave a tight nod from behind her. "I want to talk about someone who isn't listed in your programs, who doesn't have a seat, or a name card, or probably even a tassel yet," she said, "but who truthfully taught me more about strength, persistence, and character than any teacher or textbook ever could." She turned again, found my eyes, didn't look away. "Rowan Ellis, this one's for you." There was a silence that followed, wide and heavy, like the air in the gym had thickened. Heads turned. The crowd stilled. Teachers paused mid-step, and I just stood there, a paper program in one hand, tassel still dangling, while the entire room slowly, wordlessly, shifted toward me. It took me a full 5 seconds to understand she wasn't joking, not performing a cute anecdote, not giving a shout-out to the class underdog for extra applause. She meant it. The silence stretched so long that I could feel it breathing, the kind that hangs before something breaks. I could see the valedictorian's knuckles tightening slightly around the wooden edges of the podium. I don't know if you all know Rowan Ellis, she said, turning back to the crowd. Some of you might not, but I think that says more about us than it does about him. And just like that, she'd named me again. Him. With confidence. No stumble. No weird hesitance like some people used when they thought it was polite to whisper. I met Rowan during a class debate sophomore year, she continued. We were arguing whether privacy or security was more important in a post-digital world. He destroyed me. A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd, some genuine, some nervous. A few teachers exchanged glances, confused. But I remember him not gloating. I remember him staying behind after class to ask me how I prepped my sources. I remember him telling me I had a good argument, just needed to frame it better. And I remember how he packed his notes into a manila folder with the words, "This is not nothing," scrawled across the front. I blinked. That folder had lived at the bottom of my backpack all through high school. Still did. I suddenly felt the weight of it. The ridiculous Sharpie writing that had once been a joke with myself and slowly became a motto. Harper went on. Steady and serious now. Rowan has spent 4 years showing up for people who didn't even see him, helping other students study, organizing peer tutoring, building our entire student website when the administration kept delaying the IT budget. He's been turned down for committee positions he founded, voted off boards he created, passed over for things he built with his bare hands. And I know some of you in this room still think it was an accident that he wasn't listed in the program tonight. That made someone cough. Another student shifted in their chair. I'm not saying this to embarrass anyone, she said, looking straight at the principal now. I'm saying it because he deserves to be seen, because too many people mistake silence for weakness, or humility for invisibility. And I've watched this school pretend Rowan didn't exist for far too long. I didn't know what to do with my body. My shoulders felt hot. My fingers gripped the program until it nearly tore. Everyone was looking. Finally, all of them were looking. I don't want to use my one moment up here to talk about myself, she added. I want to talk about the kind of person who doesn't need a podium or applause to leave an impact. The kind of person who gets erased and still keeps showing up. The kind of person who deserves more than just a line in a program. He deserves to be called by name. Then she stepped away from the mic. And the applause didn't come immediately. It came slow. Confused at first, then furious, then loud, then everywhere. My ears rang from it. A girl in the second row turned to smile at me. One of the teachers from the art department actually stood up and clapped with both arms overhead like it was a protest rally. I didn't move. I couldn't. Something in my chest ached like I had been holding my breath since freshman year. Mr. Kravitz, my literature teacher, pushed through a few people and stepped toward me. Ellis, he said. They skipped your name. That wasn't right. I nodded slowly, unsure if my mouth worked. I'll walk you to the stage, he said. I hesitated, but then I followed him. The applause didn't stop. It wasn't roaring like it might have been for the quarterback or the valedictorian herself, but it was full and real. The kind of clapping that people do when they feel guilty for missing something and now want to make it right. Or at least pretend they always knew. I passed parents with glitter signs and kids holding their caps by the tassel. Some whispered my name. Some didn't even try to hide their surprise. Near the stage, Ms. Bernard stood stiffly, cheeks flushed, speaking to a faculty coordinator. She glanced at me, then quickly looked away. I kept walking. Someone shoved a diploma cover into my hands. It didn't have my name on it. Do you want to say anything? Mr. Kravitz asked quietly once we were behind the podium. Even just, thank you, I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I looked at Harper, still standing beside the steps. She gave me a small nod. Not a proud one, not expectant, just steady. Just human. We didn't hug. We didn't speak. But for the first time in 4 years, someone saw me completely and didn't flinch. After the ceremony, I found my name scrawled in Sharpie on the bottom of someone else's program. Someone had tried to write me in. I sat on the edge of the bleachers long after most of the crowd had cleared out. My diploma folder rested beside me, nameless. I could hear balloons popping faintly in the distance as the custodial staff began tearing down the decorations. A younger cousin of mine, Frankie, jogged up with their camera. "I got the whole thing," they said breathlessly. Like, "Your whole face during the speech." I laughed, though it came out shaky. "That's gonna be awkward to watch." "No, it's so good. You looked like you didn't know you were allowed to exist until someone said it out loud." I didn't respond, just looked down at my scuffed sneakers. Frankie sat beside me. "They messed up?" "Huh?" "Yeah," I said. "They did." They were quiet a moment, then handed me a cap not mine, just one they'd found, and stuck a gold honor cord into my lap. "Keep that," they said. "You earned it." The gym slowly emptied behind us. The chairs were half stacked. One of the janitors gave me a nod as he passed, and I nodded back. It wasn't justice. It wasn't an apology. But for the first time, I wasn't invisible. I was Rowan Ellis. 18, high school graduate, and someone had said my name into a microphone. The after-party was held at the Oak Ridge Country Club, the kind of place with manicured lawns and glass walls that made you feel like you had to speak in lowercase letters. The invitation had been emailed out by the Parent Planning Committee, addressed to students in good standing and their immediate families. I hadn't planned on going, but after the speech, after everything, I wasn't sure I could go home either. So I went. I borrowed my mom's car, still wearing my graduation gown over jeans because I never got the email about dress code. The valet looked at me like I'd stolen someone's seat. I parked it myself in the farthest corner of the lot and walked in through the back terrace, where I could already hear music and the chatter of silverware on porcelain. Inside, the ballroom shimmered with overhead crystal lights, like the ceiling had been frozen mid-thaw. People milled around in pastel dresses and tight button-downs. Buffet tables curved along the far wall, and every few feet. There was a tall golden sign that read, "Congratulations. Class of 25. I hovered near the doorway, not quite inside, not quite outside. My name hadn't been on the RSVP list. I knew it before I even asked. A staff server passed by carrying a tray of champagne flutes and mini cupcakes. I reached out for one. "Excuse me," the server said, lowering the tray just slightly. "Are you a guest? I'm a graduate," I said. He glanced at my gown, then at the clipboard in his other hand. "Name Rowan Ellis." His eyes scanned the page quickly, fingers flicking. "I don't see it here." "Right. They forgot me. Again." He hesitated, then glanced toward the event coordinator, a woman in a sleek bun and black suit, before whispering, "Just take one and move quickly. Don't draw attention." I nodded, took a cupcake, and moved like a ghost through silk. Most people were too busy to notice. The football team had claimed a cluster of tables near the dance floor. Parents stood around like they were attending a gala, comparing scholarships and gushing over Ivy League plans. I saw my chemistry lab partner sitting with her mom, both beaming. I saw people I had tutored freshman year and people who had copied off my essays junior spring. None of them looked at me, except Harper. She found me by the water fountain, holding a paper plate with a cupcake and a single napkin. She didn't smile right away, just tilted her head like she was checking if I was real. "You came," she said. "I wasn't invited." "That's kind of your whole brand," she said, shrugging. I laughed. "That's one way to put it." She leaned against the wall beside me, her hair tucked neatly behind her ear. gold honor cords tied into a loose knot and draped over one arm like a scarf. You know, I didn't plan to do that. The speech. Yeah. I had a whole thing written out about gratitude and perseverance and other safe-sounding nonsense. So what changed? She looked at me then, not just with her face, but her whole posture, like she'd been waiting for someone to ask her that exact question. I saw the program. Oh, I looked for your name, like I always do when I'm nervous. You're sort of my anchor. I blinked. Me. You sit in the second seat from the left in AP Lit. You always bring 2 pens and one of them is cracked. You chew the inside of your cheek when you're thinking. I notice you, Rowan. I didn't know what to say. My throat tightened, but I managed a smile. Thanks for saying all that. I didn't say it for thanks. We stood in silence for a few minutes. The music had shifted to something jazzy, low and ornamental. The smell of balsamic glaze drifted from the carving station. I should go before someone tells me to. I murmured. Wait. Harper reached into her clutch and pulled out a folded piece of paper. They printed an alternate program. I snagged one. I opened it. My name was there, typed in, correctly spelled. You kept this? Yeah. I thought maybe you'd want proof. Or maybe I just didn't want the only version of this night to be the one where you didn't exist. I looked at her, noticed the tiniest smudge of mascara beneath her right eye. What happens now? She shrugged. Now we go to college. Or we don't. We forget each other. Or we don't. But tonight I think you're supposed to dance. I laughed. But she wasn't joking. She held out her hand. No one here would dance with me, I said. I'm not no one. I took her hand. We didn't dance like we were in a movie. We danced like 2 kids who weren't sure if they were allowed to enjoy something that had already tried to erase them. The music shifted to something older, something swingy and strange, but it didn't matter. For the first time all night, people made space for me. They didn't cheer. They didn't boo. But they parted just enough. One of the teachers came by and nodded. The server who'd warned me smiled a little. It was a small kind of welcome, the kind I could live with. After the song ended, Harper pulled away gently. You should eat something real, and then get out of here. You too. She smiled. I've got an after-party to sneak out of in 10 minutes, but I'll see you again. Rowan, you say that like you're sure. I'm always sure of the people who survive fire. She disappeared into the crowd. I stepped off the dance floor and walked back toward the rear exit. At the door, the event coordinator finally looked at me. She raised a hand halfway, maybe to stop me, maybe to apologize, but I didn't slow down. I walked into the night air with a crumpled cupcake wrapper in my pocket and my name in print. Finally. The drive home was mostly quiet, except for the sound of the glove box rattling whenever I hit a bump. My mom's sedan always did that little background noises like it was sighing with me. I didn't turn on the radio. I let the hum of the tires fill my head, let the silence settle over the adrenaline that had carried me through the ceremony, the party, the dance. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the porch light was still on. That surprised me. Mom usually fell asleep by 10, always with the television on. Some old procedural crime show playing at a low volume in the background, but tonight the curtains were open, and I could see her shadow moving in the kitchen. I stepped through the front door as quietly as I could. My gown was still on, wrinkled now, the edge dragging slightly from where someone had stepped on it during the dance. Rowan, she called from the back. Yeah, I said, and my voice cracked. It always did when I wasn't expecting to speak. She walked into the living room holding a mug. Chamomile, probably. She wore a soft flannel robe with her reading glasses still pushed up on her head. Hey, she said gently. I waited up. You didn't have to. I know. I wanted to. She hesitated, then asked, Did it go okay? I paused. She must have noticed something in my face, because she set the mug down slowly and came to sit on the edge of the couch. Her eyes searched mine, but she didn't push. They forgot me. I said, On the list. The program. Everything. Her mouth opened slightly. What? But we got the confirmation email. I saw the form. They still forgot. But someone remembered. I reached into the inside pocket of the gown and pulled out the crumpled alternate program, handed it to her like proof of survival. She unfolded it carefully, like she was handling a paper certificate from a war. There you are, she murmured. Right there. Third column. I nodded. And someone remembered you. Harper Lynn. She raised her eyebrows. The valedictorian. She gave her speech. About me. There was a pause. A real one. Not disbelief. Just wait. Oh, she said softly. Oh, Rowan. I sank into the opposite armchair. The adrenaline was fading now, replaced by something slower and heavier. She said my name into a microphone. I whispered, and everything stopped. Mom pressed the corner of the paper down to flatten it. You know, I used to be afraid this would happen, that they'd forget me. No, she said, looking up, that they wouldn't realize how much you've already given, that you'd keep giving until there was nothing left, and they still wouldn't see it. She crossed the room, sat beside me, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. I hadn't let her do that since I was 11. Tonight. I didn't pull away. I didn't go because I knew it would make you nervous. She admitted. I didn't want to be the mom with the loud voice in the second row, but if I had known, I'm glad you weren't there, I said quickly. You would have hated it. But you didn't. I shrugged. I don't know what I felt. Maybe I still don't. She looked like she wanted to say something else, but didn't. Instead, she stood and smoothed her robe. You hungry I was? I hadn't eaten more than half a cupcake. She made grilled cheese and tomato soup, and we sat on the floor of the kitchen like we used to when I was younger, when thunderstorms would knock out the power and she'd pretend it was a picnic. We didn't talk much, just ate and existed in the same space. At one point, she said, You don't have to go to college right away. I looked up. What I know you got in. I know you got the scholarship. But if you need a break before diving back into more, you can take one. No one takes a gap year from a full ride. Mom. You're not no one, she said quietly. I didn't answer. I just kept eating. Later that night, I went to my room and opened my bottom drawer. The folder was still there. This is not nothing written across the front in thick black Sharpie. The letters half faded from rubbing against old textbooks and snack wrappers. I pulled it out and opened it on my bed. Inside were years of notes, practice debates, scratch paper filled with margin comments and flowcharts and quotes from philosophers I never really believed in, but knew judges liked. I saw the old note Harper had once passed me in sophomore English. You're the only person who makes Mr. Daniels nervous. I held it in my hand for a long time. Then I pulled out a fresh piece of paper and wrote a new title in the top right corner. This is still not nothing. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of messages, texts, DMs, even a few emails, some from classmates, a few from teachers. One was from a cousin I hadn't heard from in 3 years. I didn't know what happened until Harper posted it. I'm sorry. You deserved better. That speech gave me chills. I'm sorry I never said hi in person. You were always cool. Just quiet. I always saw you. Just didn't know how to say it. And one from Harper. They're going to remember you for a long time. Rowan, I hope you're okay with that. I stared at her message, then typed back, I think I'm finally okay with being seen. I hit send before I could overthink it. Then I got out of bed, went downstairs, and made myself coffee. I wore my gown again, even though it was wrinkled. I opened the front door and stood on the porch with my mug, watching the world move forward without me, but not away from me. Mom joined me a few minutes later. She didn't ask anything, just handed me a printout she'd made from our old home printer. It was a photo of Harper at the podium, my name in quotation marks above the speech title, "The One Who Was Forgotten." I read the caption she'd written underneath. Not anymore. The Monday after graduation felt like limbo. No more classes. No more structure. Just heat rising off the sidewalks and the unsettling quiet of a neighborhood in seasonal transition lawns unmowed. Sprinkler systems hissing to themselves, and teenagers vanishing into beach plans or packing lists. I walked to the community center that afternoon, even though I didn't have anywhere I was expected to be. The center sat 2 blocks from the high school, a squat brick building that smelled like lemon cleaner and history. It was where I used to volunteer tutoring, setting up events, sometimes just helping Miss Janine carry folding chairs out to the multi-purpose room. I hadn't been back since spring semester started, between AP tests, finals, and pretending not to care that I wasn't nominated for senior awards. I had disappeared from it, but I wasn't ready to disappear again. The lobby was empty except for the front desk, where Janine was writing something with her usual chunky purple pen. She looked up and grinned, deep lines forming at the corners of her mouth. "Well, look who decided to return from the dead," she said. "Mister, I graduated without them calling my name." I laughed, stepping closer. Word travels fast. "Sweetheart, you trended on local Facebook. I had 3 aunties and a dentist ask me if I know you. I told them you're the kid who eats the almond granola bars no one else wants." I smiled. Still true. She came around the desk and wrapped me in a hug, the kind of hug that smells like peppermint lotion and peppermint tea and makes your eyes sting unexpectedly. "I'm sorry, Rowan," she murmured near my ear. "What they did was wrong. But that girl Harper, she's got fire. I like her. She's intense." I agreed. But in a good way. "Sit down," Janine said, motioning to the row of plastic chairs by the window. "I want to hear everything. And before you say anything I know about the cupcake, a witness saw you steal it. She offered it to me," I said with mock defense. "Under duress." We sat for over an hour. I told her about the ceremony, the speech, the party, the way the crowd had parted for me like some invisible curtain had finally lifted. She listened without interrupting, nodding through the quiet parts. When I was done, she looked at me for a long moment and said, "So, what now? I don't know." I admitted, "I feel like I should be doing something important, but also, like maybe just breathing is enough." "You've done enough for them, Rowan," she said. "Now do something for you." She reached under the desk and pulled out a key ring. A small plastic label read C2 in faded pen. "I was going to give this to you in April," she said. "You were supposed to run the summer youth writing workshop, but the school board pushed back on funding and never followed through. Still, the room's yours if you want it. Even if it's just to write. Even if you just need space." I took the keys slowly. "You're serious. Always," she said. And I stocked the vending machine, even the good chips. I left with the keys in my pocket and a strange warmth in my chest, the kind that doesn't come from validation, exactly, but from being given a place, not earned, not argued for, just given. That evening, I stopped by the school. It felt empty and oddly disarmed without the rush of students. The parking lot was half full, teachers cleaning out classrooms. Maybe. I walked around the building to the old debate room. The door was unlocked. Inside, the lights buzzed softly. The whiteboard still had remnants of a bracket from the last competition. My name wasn't on it. I sat at the front desk. The one where I used to tape down name placards before matches. The one no one let me claim. Not officially. My hands hovered over the surface. It was strange how much muscle memory still lived in my fingertips. I pulled out a marker and wrote on the board. Rowan Ellis, 4-year captain. I underlined it twice. Then I stepped back and took a photo. It wasn't proof for anyone else. Just for me. On the way home, I stopped by Harper's house. I didn't text. Just stood on the curb across from her porch until she stepped outside with a confused look and a phone in her hand. Is this a movie moment, she asked? Because I didn't practice my dramatic monologue today. Maybe just the mid-credits scene. I said. She came down the steps, barefoot, hair pulled back in a lazy bun. You okay? Yeah, just weirded out by the silence. I know what you mean. We sat on her porch. The sun was bleeding out over the rooftops, and the air smelled like grass clippings and charcoal from someone's grill. I've been thinking about what you said. I told her. About being an anchor. She blushed slightly. I wasn't fishing for compliments. I know. That's why it landed. We watched a car roll past. Headlights off. Music low and slow. A dog barked 2 houses down. I think I want to write again. I said. Then write. I'm scared I won't know how. She turned to me. Then be scared. But do it anyway. I didn't answer. Just nodded. She touched my shoulder lightly before going back inside. When I got home, I opened the drawer again, took out the new page, stared at the blank space beneath the title. And this time, I didn't hesitate. Chapter 1. No one called my name, but I showed up anyway. The room labeled C2 didn't look like much. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, humming like a bad mood. The walls were off-white with patches of peeling paint near the window frames, and the folding chairs stacked in the corner looked like they hadn't been touched since before the pandemic. Still, it felt like mine the second I walked in. I flipped on the lights, opened the windows, and let the heat settle into the corners. It smelled like dry markers and old notebooks. I took the key Janine gave me and spun it once around my finger, then set it on the table, just to hear the sound, just to feel that weight again. No one knew I was here, and that, somehow, made it feel real. I brought in a box of old supplies from home, some legal pads, highlighters, a water bottle with peeling stickers. I found a whiteboard eraser in the bottom of the box that still had traces of a quote I wrote in sophomore year. Truth isn't loud, but it always stays. I remembered writing that after a failed tournament, trying to convince myself that losing didn't mean disappearing. There was something sacred about the stillness. No expectations, no deadline, no one correcting how I pronounced my own name. I set up the front table and sat there like I was waiting for a class to start. And then I began. At first, it was clunky. Just a few lines. Fragments. Memories I hadn't sorted out yet. My name was skipped. But the silence after her speech lasted longer than applause ever does. Then more came. I used to believe I was invisible because I stayed quiet. Now I know some people get ignored precisely because they carry more than others can handle. I wrote until my fingers cramped, until the light shifted on the floorboards and I realized I hadn't eaten since breakfast. I walked to the vending machine and smiled when I saw them almond granola bars, right in the second row. Janine really had stocked the good chips too. When I got back to the room, I saw someone standing in the doorway. Hey, Harper said, holding 2 iced coffees and a paper bag. Figured you'd forget lunch. I blinked. How did you even know I was here? Janine posted it on her story. She called you the Silent Revolution. Oh God, she means it in a good way, Harper said, stepping inside and glancing around. This place is underwhelming. Exactly why I like it. She set the coffees on the desk and handed me the bag. Turkey sandwich. No mayo. You seem like a no mayo person. I took a bite before answering. I love you. She raised an eyebrow. I mean, I love this sandwich. I corrected quickly, nearly choking. Definitely not declaring feelings over cold deli meat. Good to know, she said, smiling. But if you did, that would be a strong move. We sat in silence for a moment. She watched me eat. I watched the light crawl up the edge of the window. Finally, she asked, So what are you writing? I pushed the notebook across the table. She read quietly, pausing once to reread a line. You ever think about turning this into something bigger, she asked. Like a book, I shrugged. Who would read it? She gave me a look. Are you serious, I mean? I know it matters to me, but to anyone else? Rowan, she interrupted. I've been reposted, quoted, interviewed, and people still remember that speech because it was about you. I looked down. But that moment was yours. No. I just held the mic. The moment belonged to you. The truth hit me harder than I expected. Maybe because it didn't sound like flattery. It sounded like she'd been waiting for me to finally believe it. I think, she continued, you should write the whole thing. From the beginning. And don't spare anyone. Not even yourself. I exhaled slowly. You'd help me. Of course, she said. Besides, the world needs more books that begin with, They forgot my name, and I remembered my worth. Later that week, I printed out the first 5 pages. Janine taped them to the bulletin board next to the rec center entrance under a handwritten sign, New Voices Series by Rowan Ellis, local graduate and actual legend. At first, I cringed, but then someone ripped off one of the contact slips, then 2. Then a middle schooler stopped by the room one afternoon just to ask, Are you the guy who got skipped at graduation? I guess I am. I said, You're kind of famous. And brave. That night, I stayed up late, writing more. I didn't try to make it poetic. I didn't reach for fancy metaphors or twist things into something they weren't. I just told the truth. I wrote about the way I used to count ceiling tiles to calm myself during assemblies. I wrote about the teacher who praised my ideas but never remembered my pronouns. I wrote about the counselor who told me to tone it down a little when I applied for leadership positions. And then I wrote about Harper, about her voice, clear and dangerous like a blade that doesn't miss. About the moment I realized being seen wasn't about attention, it was about being held in the eyes of someone who doesn't blink when you show up fully. The chapters kept coming. I called the project Named. Every page felt like a mirror I used to avoid. Now cleaned and turned toward the sun. At the end of June, the school board announced a new scholarship for under-recognized student leaders. They named it after some random donor. Of course. But in the fine print, they mentioned a certain speech and a certain graduate who epitomized quiet excellence. Harper texted me a screenshot with one word, Ha. I replied, They'll never say my name loud, but they'll write around it forever. By mid-July. I had over 50 pages. A local podcast invited me to speak. Harper and I shared a Google Doc full of edits and ideas, and the community center started hosting weekly writing nights, unofficial, free, full of kids who showed up just to be around other people who weren't trying to be loud, but real. Every week, someone new came up to me and said, I thought I was the only one who felt invisible. And every week, I told them the same thing. You're not. You never were. It was strange how quickly my life rearranged itself. No official job, no schedule, no name on any corporate badge or email signature. But every morning, I woke up knowing exactly where I needed to be, C2. The room with the chipped whiteboard and the scuffed linoleum floor, the one that still smelled faintly like old expo markers and duct tape. It wasn't just mine anymore. The second week of July, a group of 3 middle schoolers showed up. No warning. Just shuffled in with backpacks and sat on the floor like it was normal. "You the writer guy?" one of them asked. "I guess," I said. "You help kids write their own stuff?" "Sure." They stayed for 3 hours. One wrote fan fiction about a girl who could speak to shadows. Another wrote poems on sticky notes and stuck them all over the desk. The third just watched, tapping a pencil like a drumbeat. I didn't ask them their grades. I didn't correct grammar. I just read what they gave me and asked, "What made you write this?" And every time, they answered like no one had ever asked before. By the third session, 5 more kids had joined. By the 5th session, Harper had made a Google form for signups and printed Young Voices workshop signs with rainbow fonts and glitter borders. We stuck one on the door. I didn't even flinch. One afternoon, after everyone had gone, Harper and I stayed behind cleaning up. There were paper scraps everywhere. Some kid had spilled juice on the floor and tried to clean it with an entire roll of paper towels. As I was sweeping, Harper looked up from the desk and said, "I think this is what you were meant to do. Clean up after children." She rolled her eyes. "Build spaces that don't erase people." I paused. "You really think so?" "I think some people lead by being loud, and some people lead by holding space. You're the second kind. You make people feel possible." It was a compliment so gentle and specific I didn't know how to respond. So I changed the subject. "Have you decided on Columbia?" She nodded. "Yeah. They gave me extra scholarship money after my speech went viral. Said I showed leadership under pressure." "You did." I just said the quiet part out loud. "Most people don't." She looked at me. "Are you really not going to college? I'm deferring for a year." I said, "Officially? Unofficially? I don't think I want to learn how to write from people who don't think I exist. You'll have to leave eventually." "Rowan?" "I know. But not today." That night, I went home and found my mom at the kitchen table with her reading glasses on and a stack of mail. "You've got another letter," she said, holding up an envelope. "From the district." I opened it slowly. The paper inside was stiff and official, with letterhead at the top and a lot of legal spacing. But the words made my chest tighten. "Dear Rowan Ellis, we would like to formally apologize for the omission of your name from the 2025 graduation ceremony materials. This oversight does not reflect your exemplary record, contributions, and academic achievements. Enclosed is a corrected diploma and a copy of the updated program." I held the diploma. My name was there. Rowan Ellis typed in bold serif font, no asterisks, no footnotes. There was a sticky note attached, clearly added last minute. "You were always on the list. We just failed to say it out loud. M. Bernard." I didn't know what to feel. Gratitude, closure. Maybe just relief. But mostly, I felt like the note was too late, and that was okay. I slid the diploma into the back of my desk drawer and kept writing. That same week, I got a call from a local nonprofit. One of their coordinators had come across the pages of names I'd posted online. They wanted to commission a series of spoken-word pieces from young writers about erasure, identity, and belonging. They offered me a small stipend and a mentorship slot for the fall. I said yes before I could let doubt talk me out of it. The next day, I walked back into C2 with something new. Confidence. Maybe. Not the loud kind. Not the kind people cheer for. But the kind that makes your voice steady when it never used to be. That afternoon, the kid who always wrote poems on sticky notes asked me if I had a book out. "Not yet." I said, "What are you going to call it?" I paused. Then I said, The ones they forgot. He nodded, satisfied. That's a cool name. I'd read that. It hit me then what all of this really meant. It wasn't just about the ceremony, or the program, or the diploma. It was about who gets remembered and who gets rewritten, who gets announced, and who gets written in by hand when the system leaves them out. I didn't want revenge. I didn't even want recognition anymore. I just wanted the erasure to stop. So I kept going. By August. Named had a waiting list. Local teens. Some homeschooled. Some suspended. Some with anxiety so bad they could barely speak when they entered. But they wrote, and they showed up. And every single one of them called me by name. One girl wrote an essay about losing her sister. She read it out loud through tears, and when she finished, no one clapped. They just sat with her, held the silence, and afterward, she said, "This is the first place I didn't feel crazy." Another boy wrote about being queer in a family that used religion like a weapon. His title was, "I Am Not Your Shame." When he finished reading, he looked at me like I was the only person who could make it matter. I said, "It already does." I stayed late every night after the last workshop. Not to clean, not to plan. Just to sit in the quiet and remind myself that I wasn't invisible. That this room, these words, these people, they were proof. Proof that even when the world forgets your name, you can still write it. Over and over. In permanent ink. The last week of summer brought with it a strange stillness. Like the air itself was holding its breath. The workshops had wrapped. The final writing circle ended with a group photo taped crookedly to the C2 door. Our arms around each other. Some kids smiling wide, others just holding their notebooks to their chests like shields. I stood in the middle, a little off balance, a little unsure what came next. Harper was leaving the next morning. We met for coffee in the old bookstore cafe, the one with creaky wooden floors and oversweet iced lattes. She wore jeans and a Columbia sweatshirt already speckled with crumbs. Her suitcase sat beside the table like a silent third party. "You okay?" I asked. "I'm weird," she replied. Like, "I've waited years to get out of this town, and now that I'm leaving, all I can think about is who I'm going to miss." "You'll be fine. You're Harper Lynn." "Yeah, but that doesn't mean I'm not scared." She paused, chewing her straw thoughtfully. "You ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't said anything that day? I try not to." "I do," she said. "A lot. Because I almost didn't." I looked up. I stood backstage, she continued, with the mic in my hand, reading my original speech about gratitude and responsibility and all the usual fluff. I kept thinking, don't do it. Don't make this about you. But then I looked out and saw you standing alone by the bleachers like you were bracing for another hit, and it just snapped. I couldn't go through with pretending. "I'm glad you didn't." She met my eyes. "Me too. Because I think if I had stayed quiet, I would have remembered it as the moment I became someone I didn't like." That landed deeper than I expected. She reached into her bag and pulled out a manila envelope. "Here. What's this?" "My original speech. Thought you might want to see what didn't happen." I opened the envelope, typed pages, polished phrases, neat bullet points. Perfectly forgettable. "I'm framing the other one." I joked. "You better," she said. "You were the moment." Rowan. I just lit the fuse. We walked outside together. The air was warm, tinted gold by the late afternoon sun. Her car was already packed. "I'm not going to say goodbye," she said, "because I don't think we're done." "Okay," I said quietly. "But I do want to say this. Don't wait to be named again. Do it yourself next time." I nodded, throat tight. She leaned in and hugged me, short and fierce, Then she got in her car and drove away without looking back. And that was it. The cafe disappeared behind me. The summer folded shut like a well-read book. I went home and stood in front of the mirror, holding the envelope. I looked at my reflection for a long time, not to fix my hair or study my expression, but to say something to myself I'd never said before. You didn't imagine it. You mattered. The next day, I returned to C2, alone. No students, no glitter signs, just me and the whiteboard. I erased the name from the top corner. Young Voices Workshop Rowan Ellis. Then I wrote something new, coming soon named, a memoir in pieces. Underneath, I added a line from one of the kids. The first time someone saw me was when I wrote something down. I spent the day pulling pages from my notebook and organizing them into folders. My desk became a chaos of ink and coffee stains and post-it flags, but it felt alive, like the story was finally forming bones. Around 5 p.m., Janine stopped by with 2 slices of pizza. "You looked like someone who forgot to eat," she said. "You're not wrong." She sat across from me, folding her napkin carefully before speaking. "I got an email today." "Oh, from the school board. They want to name a new writing scholarship after someone." Guess who I blinked? "No." "Oh. Yes." "What, why?" "Because you created something that made other people write about themselves in ways that made adults cry." I shook my head, overwhelmed. "I don't need my name on a scholarship." "You don't." She agreed. "But the kids who get it will know they're not the first to be overlooked. And that matters." I looked down at the folder labeled Chapter 8. The apology letter arrived too late. I just wanted a seat, not a plaque. "Too bad," Janine said, grinning. "Because your name's already been submitted. You can't unbe the person you've become." We ate the pizza in silence after that, but it was the kind of silence that feels full, like a held note in a song you almost forgot. A week later, I got a call from the library downtown. They'd heard about Named through a student whose older sister had joined the workshop. They wanted me to do a reading. It wasn't a big event. No stage, no spotlight. Just a circle of metal chairs in the community room and a stack of paper programs that spelled my name correctly. That alone would have been enough. But when I stood up to read, I saw someone in the back row, my old debate coach, Mr. Wyatt, the one who said I was too sensitive to lead. He clapped the loudest when I finished. After the reading, a woman came up to me and said, "My daughter was in your group this summer. She used to cry at the thought of reading out loud. Now she won't stop performing her own poems in the kitchen." I smiled. "That's her doing, not mine." "You gave her a room where she could become someone," she said. "That's everything." And maybe, in a way, it was that night. I walked home through the quiet streets, past my old school, past the graduation banner still half hanging in the gym window. I looked up at the sky stars hidden behind clouds and whispered my own name into the dark. Not because I needed the world to echo it, but because I wanted to hear it from myself. Summer ended not with a bang, but a slow, deliberate unraveling. Stores swapped out sunscreen displays for notebooks. Buses started test driving their routes again. The hum of the neighborhood shifted from loose and warm to tight and watchful. In a different year, I might have been packing boxes, folding laundry into piles labeled dorm and not dorm, wondering what my roommate would be like or if my name would show up on the right rosters this time. But this year, I stayed. No campus tour, no meal plan. Just C2, my mother's kitchen table, and an unfinished manuscript that kept calling to me like a half-remembered song. I spent the first week of September in a blur of writing and revisiting old chapters, throwing out whole sections that sounded too careful, too distant. I didn't want the book to read like a confession or a revenge note. I wanted it to feel like opening a locked drawer and handing someone the contents without flinching. The workshop group started messaging again. Some asked for edits on their college essays. Some sent late-night voice notes about ideas they didn't know how to begin. One kid asked if I'd read his speech for a cousin's quinceañera. I said yes to all of it. I didn't tell them that I'd been invited to speak at the first school board meeting of the year. The email had come late, from a new superintendent I'd never met. It was polite, formal. They wanted me to talk about student inclusion, voice equity, and the importance of institutional recognition. I almost deleted it. But then I remembered how it felt to hear my name from someone else's mouth, how the silence afterward had rewritten everything. Maybe this was my turn to do that for someone else. I wore the same shirt I'd worn under my gown on graduation night. A black button-up with a barely visible ink stain on the collar left from an anxious pen tap during AP Calculus. The meeting was in the high school auditorium. I arrived 10 minutes early, alone. Janine had offered to come. My mom, too. Even Harper, who texted from New York. If you bomb, I'll tell Columbia I don't know you. If you soar, I'll say I trained you. I replied, you trained me by yelling at me to stop shrinking. Thanks. I stood in the wings and waited as the agenda items ticked by. Budget reports, safety protocols, then finally, item 7D community voices. They called my name. This time, it echoed. I stepped up to the podium, the mic taller than I remembered. The lights washed out the first row of faces, but I could still feel the eyes. I took a breath. My name is Rowan Ellis. I began. I graduated from this school 3 months ago. At that graduation, my name was not read. A murmur. I don't bring this up for pity or apology. I bring it up because what happened to me was not just a clerical error. It was the result of a long pattern of being quietly erased, of being looked at, but not seen. I paused. Let the silence stretch. I wasn't the only one. There are dozens of students in this district who do the work but never get the recognition, who stay late to build things that get used but not credited, who are told to be grateful instead of bold, who learn to write their own names into margins because no one else will. I looked up. You cannot fix this with one apology letter, but you can listen. I read an excerpt from Name the Chapter where I sat in the gym with the folded program in my hand, watching a room full of people cheer for everyone else. Then I closed the folder and said, we don't need louder speakers. We need spaces where quiet voices aren't mistaken for emptiness. I stepped down to soft applause, but it wasn't performative this time. It felt like something had been heard. Afterward, a teacher I barely knew stopped me in the lobby. I'm sorry, he said. I saw you every week and I never asked your name. You just did. I replied. Outside, the air had cooled. Fall wasn't fully here yet, but it lingered in the edges of the wind, like a warning or a welcome, I wasn't sure which. That weekend, I got a letter from a publishing collective that specialized in youth memoirs. They'd read my excerpts online. They wanted a full manuscript. I walked into C2 and sat down hard. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like a door creaking open. I didn't respond right away. I needed to finish it first. Not just the book. The part of myself that still wanted to prove something. I went back through every page and stripped out the parts that sounded like I was trying to impress anyone. I rewrote the opening line 5 times. Eventually, I settled on this. They forgot to call my name at graduation, so I wrote it here, where no one could erase it. One morning, while editing a chapter about the aftermath of Harper's speech, I got an envelope in the mail, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Rowan, I read your piece. I'm sorry I didn't see you when I should have. I know I can't rewrite what happened, but I hope you keep writing. The world is clearer with your voice in it. Mrs. Bernard. I folded the letter and slid it into the back of the manuscript binder. A few days later, I sent the full draft to the publisher. I hit send and sat there, hands still hovering over the keyboard, waiting for regret, waiting for fear. Nothing came. Only the quiet confidence of someone who finally stopped asking for permission to be real. The email came on a Wednesday. I was sitting on the library steps, the ones worn down by 100 quiet years of shuffled feet and dropped backpacks. The air had turned properly autumn by then, edges of cold sneaking into sleeves, leaves curling in on themselves like they knew what was coming. I was scrolling without really seeing until I saw the subject line. Your manuscript, next steps. My breath caught in my throat. I clicked it open. Heartbeat so loud it drowned out the sound of passing cars. Dear Rowan, we've reviewed your full manuscript and are moved beyond words. Named is everything we look for: raw, sharp, tender, true. We would be honored to publish your story. Let's talk about next steps layout, cover design, timeline. This book matters, and we want the world to know why. Welcome to our family. Elise, lead editor, Juniper Press. I read it 3 times. Then I just stared at the screen, not even smiling. Not yet. Just feeling. There was no one there to celebrate with. No balloons, no group hug. But that felt fitting. The most important parts of this journey had always happened when no one was watching. I walked home slowly, letting the message settle into my bones. On the way, I passed the high school. A new banner hung above the main entrance. Voices That Matter Student Writers Exhibition. October 12th. I recognized the font. It was Harper's. Inside the building, the halls smelled the same floor wax and pencil shavings, but everything felt slightly tilted, like the axis had shifted. I peeked into C2. It was empty, except for a laminated sign on the door now: C2, the Rowan Ellis Writing Room, Ellis Writing, dedicated to those who were once unheard. I stood there, alone in the doorway, hands still cold from the wind, heart impossibly full. Later that night, I texted Harper. Me got the email. Harper the email me. They want to publish? Harper Rowan. I'm crying. Not even fake tears. Like full ugly sobs in my dorm bed. I knew this was coming. I just didn't think I'd feel it this hard. Me. Thank you. For starting it all. Harper. You started it? I just refused to let you go invisible. That weekend, I visited the rec center again. Janine met me with her usual peppermint tea and a folder of new student essays. She looked at me with that tilted smile of hers. So, you're gonna be a published author? I guess so, I said. She handed me a sticky note. Then you need to read this. It was written in a child's messy print. Rowan is cool because he listens when I'm quiet. I didn't know who wrote it. It didn't matter. I stuck it in the back of my phone case. Let it live there like a small reminder of who I used to be and who I wanted to keep being. The night of the Student Writers Exhibition, the gymnasium was filled with folding chairs again. But this time, I was on stage front and center with a microphone that didn't crackle and a list of names that included mine. They asked me to read an excerpt. I chose the part from Chapter 7, the one where I first stood at the podium, shaking, saying, "You cannot fix this with one apology letter. But you can listen." I saw parents shift in their seats, teachers nod. A few kids I didn't know scribbled things in notebooks, and for the first time, I didn't wonder if I belonged there. After the applause, a girl approached me, maybe 14, oversized hoodie, chipped nail polish, one earbud still in. "Your book? It kinda made me cry," she said, in a good way. "Thank you," I replied, "and I wrote something too. Can I show you?" She handed me a folded sheet of lined paper. A short story, written in pencil, the eraser marks like scars across the sentences. It was about a girl who became invisible every time someone looked away from her. I love it, I told her. She bit her lip. It's not perfect. It's yours. That's enough. She smiled, shy but real, then slipped into the crowd. That night, I went home and sat at my desk. The manuscript was done. The publisher was real. The work was no longer silent. But still, I opened a fresh page and wrote, "This is not the end." I wrote about the girl in the hoodie. I wrote about Janine's sticky note. I wrote about Harper's voice, clear and defiant. And I wrote about myself once erased, now in ink. There was no need for a closing chapter. No final ribbon to tie. Some stories don't end cleanly. They keep expanding, rippling outward in quiet, insistent ways. Mine started with silence. It continued because someone broke it. And now, maybe, it will echo in someone else's chest the way it first echoed in mine.